Captain Jake Morrison stared at the coffee stain on his uniform and wondered if he should change before the morning briefing. The small bridge of the UES Defiance hummed quietly around him as his crew went about their routine patrol duties near Jupiter. It was Tuesday morning, ship time, and nothing interesting had happened in 3 weeks. "Captain, we have something strange on sensors," called out Lieutenant Amy Collins from her station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that made Jake look up from his coffee cup. "Define strange, Amy," Jake said, walking over to her console. The young officer had been with them for 6 months and rarely got excited about anything. 3 large objects just appeared on long-range sensors. "They're big, sir, really big, and they weren't there 5 minutes ago." Jake felt a cold sensation in his stomach. Objects didn't just appear in space, especially not big ones. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life, displaying 3 massive shapes against the star field. Each ship was at least 10 times the size of the Defiance, and their design was unlike anything in human records. Smooth curves and strange angles that hurt to look at for too long. "Sir, they're hailing us," reported Communications Officer Ben Parker, his voice tight with nervousness. "Audio and visual." "Put it through," Jake ordered, straightening his uniform despite the coffee stain. The screen changed to show a creature that made Jake's skin crawl. It looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. When it spoke, its voice was deep and filled with arrogance. "Primitive human vessel. I am Commander Zethkar of the Valoran Empire. Your species has been observed and catalogued. You will surrender immediately and prepare for subjugation." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry. Did you just say subjugation?" The alien creature made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species shows promise as laborers. Those who cooperate will be relocated to appropriate facilities. Those who resist will be eliminated. This is not a negotiation." "I see." Jake looked around at his crew. Amy was pale but focused on her console. Ben was recording everything. The rest of his officers watched him carefully, waiting for orders. "Can I ask you something, Commander Zethkar?" "You may ask." "I am feeling generous." "How long have you been watching us?" "Several of your decades. We have observed your primitive wars, your weak governments, your inability to unite even your own species. You are not a threat." Jake nodded slowly. "That's interesting. Because you see, we humans have this saying, never judge a book by its cover. Do you know what that means?" Commander Zethkar's eyes narrowed. "Explain this saying." "It means you shouldn't assume you know what someone is capable of just by looking at them." Jake smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Amy, activate the emergency beacon. Full power." "Sir, that will alert every human ship in the system," Amy said. "That's the idea." Jake turned back to the alien commander. "Here's the thing, Zethkar. You've been watching us fight each other and you think that makes us weak. But you missed something important. When humans fight each other, it's practice. When we fight together against a common enemy, that's when things get interesting." The alien's expression changed. "You dare to threaten us? Your single ship against our fleet?" "Oh, I'm not threatening you. I'm educating you." Jake gestured to Ben. "Show him the tactical display." The screen split to show the 3 alien ships and the growing number of human vessels converging on their position. What had started as empty space around Jupiter was now filled with ships of all sizes. Military vessels, cargo haulers converted for combat, even some civilian ships with improvised weapons. "How is this possible?" Commander Zethkar demanded. "Our intelligence reports indicated your species lacks coordination." "Your intelligence was wrong," Jake replied calmly. "We fight each other when we're bored, but when someone threatens our home, we become something else entirely." The first shots came from the human ships. Not the massive energy weapons the aliens expected, but small, precise strikes that targeted specific systems. The aliens returned fire with devastating beams that should have destroyed human ships instantly. Instead, the human vessels scattered like schools of fish, reforming in new patterns that confused the alien targeting systems. Jake watched as Captain Lisa Grant's ship, the UES Valiant, danced between enemy fire while her crew worked to disable rather than destroy the alien vessels. Why aren't they dying? Commander Zethkar's voice carried a note of panic. Our weapons should be obliterating them. Because we've been fighting each other for thousands of years, Jake explained, dodging another energy beam. Every weapon you can imagine we've faced. Every tactic you know we've countered. And every mistake you can make we've learned from. The battle raged for 6 hours. Jake watched in amazement as human ships coordinated attacks with a precision that surprised even him. They moved like parts of a single organism, each crew knowing exactly what the others were thinking. Commander Steve Miller's heavy cruiser provided covering fire, while smaller ships darted in to target weak points. Captain Mary Johnson's reconnaissance vessel fed targeting data to ships across the fleet. Captain Danny Wright's engineering corps worked frantically to adapt human weapons to alien defenses. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Grant," Ben reported. "Put her through." Lisa Grant's face appeared on a corner of the screen. She looked tired but determined. "Jake, we've got 2 of their ships disabled. The third one is trying to retreat. Should we let it go?" Jake considered this. Around him, his crew waited for his decision. On the main screen, Commander Zethkar looked increasingly desperate as reports from his own ships painted a picture of total defeat. "What do you think, Commander?" Jake asked the alien. "Still think we're not a threat?" "This is impossible. Your species is primitive. Your technology is inferior. How are you winning?" "Because you made a mistake," Jake said quietly. "You assumed that primitive meant weak. You assumed that divided meant helpless. But most importantly, you assumed that being human meant being predictable." The third alien ship was now limping away from the battle, its weapons disabled and hull breached in several places. The human fleet could have destroyed it easily, but they held their fire. "Captain Grant, let them go," Jake ordered. "But make sure they have a clear recording of everything that happened here." "Understood, sir. Any particular message you want them to take home?" Jake looked directly at Commander Zethkar. "Tell them that humans don't make good slaves. We make terrible enemies and excellent friends. The choice of which one we become is always up to them." The alien commander's image flickered as his ship's systems failed. "This is not over, human. The Galactic Council will hear of this. They will send fleets that will blot out your sun." "Good," Jake replied. "We'll be waiting." As the alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, Jake looked around at his crew. They had just fought humanity's first interstellar war and won, but he knew this was only the beginning. "Amy, start scanning those disabled ships. I want to know everything about their technology. Ben, get me a line to Earth Command. They need to know what we're dealing with." "Sir," Amy said quietly, "what if more of them come? What if they bring bigger fleets?" Jake smiled grimly. "Then we'll show them what humans do when someone really makes us angry. Because today, they just made us mad. Next time, they might make us furious. And trust me, Amy, they really don't want to see us furious." As the Defiance moved toward the disabled alien vessels, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just crossed a line from which there would be no return. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had just announced their presence in the most dramatic way possible. The galaxy was about to learn what made humans truly terrifying. Dr. Amy Collins stood in the massive hangar bay, staring at the alien ship that had changed everything. 3 days had passed since the battle near Jupiter, and the captured Valoran vessel sat like a sleeping giant under bright work lights. Teams of engineers and scientists crawled over every inch of its hull, taking measurements and running tests. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way," said Dr. Peter Stone, joining Amy at the observation deck. He was the lead physicist on the reverse engineering team, and his eyes held the same mixture of fear and excitement that Amy felt. "Beautiful isn't the word I'd use," Amy replied, checking her tablet for the latest reports. "Deadly, maybe. Advanced, certainly, but we're learning fast." Below them, Captain Ben Parker supervised a team removing panels from the ship's engine section. The Valoran technology was unlike anything humans had seen before, but that didn't stop them from figuring it out. If anything, it seemed to motivate them more. "Any word from Earth?" Peter asked. Amy nodded grimly. President Williams addressed the world this morning. Full mobilization. Every major nation is contributing resources. It's like someone flipped a switch and suddenly we're all on the same team. That was the thing that surprised Amy most. In EM, the 3 days since first contact, humanity had transformed. Old enemies were sharing technology. Competing corporations were pooling resources. Military forces that had never worked together were coordinating like they'd trained together for years. Dr. Collins, you need to see this, called out Lieutenant Kate Sullivan from the ship's main console. Kate was young but brilliant, and she'd been the first to crack the alien computer systems. Amy and Peter hurried down to the ship's bridge. The alien controls were still confusing to look at, but Kate had managed to interface human computers with the Valoran systems. What did you find? Amy asked. Their communication logs, Kate said, her face pale. Jake was right to let that ship escape. Look at this. The screen displayed text that had been translated from Valoran. It was a message sent just hours after the battle, and reading it made Amy's blood run cold. Command, this is Zethkar. The human species is not what we believed. They fight with coordination that exceeds our models. Their ships move in patterns we cannot predict. They adapt to our weapons faster than should be possible. Recommend immediate council session. The humans are dangerous. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. They're afraid of us. It gets worse, Kate continued, scrolling through more messages. Look at this response from their high command. They're calling an emergency meeting of something called the Galactic Council. Every major species in their part of space. They want to discuss the human problem. Peter whistled low. So we went from unknown primitives to galactic threat in one afternoon. Dr. Collins, called a voice from across the hangar. Amy turned to see General Chris Davis approaching with his usual purposeful stride. The man had been put in charge of Earth's military response, and he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. General, what can we do for you? I need to know how long before we can build ships using their technology, Davis said without preamble. The Joint Chiefs are asking for timelines. Amy looked at Peter, who shrugged. Honestly, General, we're moving faster than anyone thought possible. The engineering teams are saying 6 months for a prototype, maybe a year for full production. Not fast enough, Davis replied. I'm hearing rumors that our new alien friends have something called the Omega Fleet. Ships designed to sterilize entire planets. If they decide we're too dangerous to live, we need to be ready. What do you need from us? Amy asked. Everything. Every secret this ship holds. Every advantage we can get. Because if the intercepted communications are accurate, we're about to face the combined military might of half the galaxy. Amy nodded. We'll do our best, General. Your best better be extraordinary, Doctor, because ordinary isn't going to save us. After the General left, Amy returned to her work with renewed urgency. Around the hangar, she could see the same determination in every face. Humans had always been good in a crisis, but this was different. This was survival of the species, and everyone knew it. Captain Danny Wright arrived with his team of combat engineers 2 hours later. Danny had a reputation for making impossible things work, and his first look at the alien ship's weapon systems made him grin like a child on Christmas morning. Amy, this is incredible, he said, running his hands over the energy weapon controls. The power output alone is 10 times anything we've built, but the focusing system is actually simple once you understand the principles. Simple? Peter asked skeptically. Simple doesn't mean easy, Danny clarified, but it means we can improve on it. See, they built this for reliability and long-term use. We can strip out the safety systems, increase the power flow, and boost the firing rate by at least 50%. Amy stared at him. You want to make their weapons more dangerous? I want to make our weapons more dangerous, Danny corrected, because when they come back, and they will come back, I want them to face something they've never seen before. The work continued around the clock. Teams of specialists studied every system, every component, every line of code in the alien ships, computers. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. Captain Lisa Grant arrived on the 4th day with disturbing news from the outer system patrols. "We're seeing scout ships," she reported to the assembled team leaders. "Small, fast vessels that appear just long enough to scan our positions before jumping away." "How many?" Amy asked. "At least a dozen in the past day. They're mapping our defenses, counting our ships, analyzing our movements. Classic pre-invasion reconnaissance." "General." Tavis had been quiet during the briefing, but now he spoke up. "How long do we have?" "Unknown," Lisa admitted. "But if I were planning an invasion, I'd want at least 2 weeks of detailed intelligence before moving. Maybe less if I was confident in my superiority." "Then we have 2 weeks to become something they don't expect," Davis said grimly. Amy looked around the room at the faces of humanity's best and brightest. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and leaders who had dropped everything to work on humanity's survival. In just 4 days, they had learned more about alien technology than some species learned in centuries. "What if we're thinking about this wrong?" Amy said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "What if our advantage isn't that we can match their technology, but that we can do things with it they never imagined?" Captain Steve Miller, who had been silent throughout the meeting, leaned forward. "Explain." "Every species develops technology based on their nature, their psychology, their way of thinking. The Valorans built these ships for straightforward combat. Overwhelming firepower, heavy armor, predictable tactics. But humans don't think like that." "Go on," General Davis encouraged. "We're sneaky. We're unpredictable. We use whatever works, whether it's honorable or not. What if we take their technology and use it in ways they never considered?" Danny Wright's grin widened. "Stealth systems on their heavy cruisers. Point defense weapons modified for ship-to-ship combat. Cargo ships converted into missile platforms." "Exactly," Amy said, feeling excitement build in her chest. "They expect us to fight like them. But we're going to fight like humans." Peter Stone nodded slowly. "The intercepted communications keep mentioning how we move in patterns they can't predict. What if that's not just our ship formations? What if that's how our entire species thinks? Then, they're in for a very unpleasant surprise," General Davis said with satisfaction. "Dr. Collins, how soon can you give me a working prototype?" Amy looked at her team, saw the determination in their eyes, and made a decision that would change the course of human history. "Give us 1 week, General. 1 week, and we'll show you what humans can do when we really put our minds to it." The meeting broke up and everyone returned to their work. Amy couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to surprise everyone, including themselves. The galaxy thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn they were very, very wrong. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from 43 different species sat in their designated sections, all staring at the holographic display that showed the destruction of Valoran Station 7. The images were hard to look at but impossible to ignore. Ambassador Veltar of the Ashanti Federation shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her people were known for their peaceful nature, and the scenes of destruction made her stomach turn. But it wasn't the destruction itself that frightened her. It was how methodical it had been. "The human fleet arrived without warning," reported Commander Kethavar, his voice shaking as he described what his scouts had witnessed. 17 ships, all using modified Valoran technology. They disabled the station's defenses in the first 10 minutes, then broadcast a message to all inhabitants. The recording played across the chamber's speakers. A human voice, calm and professional, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "This is Colonel Danny Wright of the Human Defense Force. Valoran Station 7 is now under human control. All civilian personnel will be evacuated safely. All military personnel will surrender their weapons and report to designated areas. Any attempt to resist will be met with overwhelming force. You have 10 minutes to comply." 10 minutes, whispered Council. Leader Thexara, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. They gave an entire military installation 10 minutes to surrender. "And when the Valorans refused?" asked another council member. Commander Kethvar activated another recording. This one showed the human ships in action. They moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Instead of the massive, lumbering movements typical of large warships, these vessels danced through space with an elegance that was beautiful and terrifying. They didn't destroy the station. Kethvar continued. They dissected it. Every weapon, system, every shield generator, every communications array was targeted individually and destroyed. The Valorans could only watch as their defenses were stripped away piece by piece. Ambassador Veltar watched the recording with growing horror. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were making statements. Each attack was designed not just to defeat the enemy, but to send a message to anyone watching. "What happened to the survivors?" she asked quietly. "That's the strangest part," Kethvar replied. "The humans established refugee camps. They provided medical care, food, even entertainment for the children. The Valoran civilians are being treated better as prisoners than they were as citizens of their own empire." Confused murmurs filled the chamber. This didn't match any known pattern of conquest. Species either enslaved their enemies or destroyed them. They didn't conquer them and then treat them kindly. "There's more," Kethvar continued. "We intercepted communications between human ships during the battle. They were discussing the psychological impact of their actions on other species. They knew we were watching. They wanted us to see what they could do." Council Leader Thexara's voice carried a note of desperation. "How many Valoran installations have fallen?" 17 in the past month. Every major military base within 50 light-years of their home system. The Valoran Empire is effectively finished as a military force. The chamber fell silent again. The Valoran Empire had been one of the strongest military powers in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species. The idea that they could be defeated so quickly by a previously unknown species was almost impossible to accept. "What do we know about human military capabilities?" asked Admiral Zorthak of the militant hegemony. His species prided itself on military excellence, and the human victories had shaken his confidence. "More than we want to," replied Dr. Yilnara, the Council's chief intelligence analyst. She activated a new display showing human ship designs. "They've taken Valoran technology and improved it in ways our engineers say should be impossible. Faster engines, more powerful weapons, better shields. But that's not the worst part," she continued. "The worst part is how they fight. Watch this." The display showed a tactical analysis of the human attack on Valoran Station 12. The human ships moved in patterns that hurt to think about. They seemed to anticipate enemy movements before they happened, coordinating attacks with a precision that suggested some form of shared consciousness. "Are they a hive mind?" asked someone from the back of the chamber. "No," Dr. Yilnara replied. "That's what makes this so frightening. They're individuals, but they fight like a single organism. Our analysts think it's because they've been fighting each other for so long that they've developed an intuitive understanding of combat tactics." Ambassador Veltar stood up slowly. As one of the few council members who had actually studied human culture, she felt obligated to speak. "Honored counselors, I've spent years analyzing human communications and cultural broadcasts. I believe we're making a fundamental error in our assessment of this species." "Explain," ordered Council Leader Thexara. "We keep trying to understand them in terms of conquest and territory, but humans don't seem to want to rule us. They want to ensure we can never threaten them again. There's a difference." "What difference?" demanded Admiral Zorthak. "A conqueror takes your territory and rules your people. A protector eliminates threats and then helps rebuild. Look at their actions. They destroy military targets but protect civilians. They capture territory but don't establish permanent occupation. They're not trying to build an empire. They're trying to build security." The chamber erupted in discussion. Half the representatives seemed to find this idea comforting, while the other half found it even more terrifying. "You're saying they're not interested in ruling the galaxy?" asked Council Leader Thexara. "I'm saying they're interested in making sure the galaxy can never threaten them again," Veltar replied. "And that might be worse. A conqueror can be negotiated with, bargained with, even overthrown. But how do you negotiate with someone whose only goal is to make sure you're never strong enough to hurt them?" Dr. Yilnara activated another display, this one showing human population centers and industrial capacity. "If Ambassador Veltar is correct, then we need to consider the implications. Human production has increased by 400% since first contact. They're building ships faster than any species in recorded history. How is that possible? Asked Admiral Zorthak. Because they're not just building warships, Dr. Yilnara explained. They're converting everything. Cargo haulers become missile platforms. Passenger liners become troop transports. Mining vessels become heavy assault ships. They're turning their entire civilization into a military machine. The holographic display showed the transformation of human space over the past 2 months. What had been a peaceful collection of colonies and trade routes was now a fortress bristling with weapons and defensive installations. More disturbing, Dr. Yilnara continued, is their recruitment. They're not just training soldiers, they're training entire populations for war. Children as young as 10 are learning basic military tactics in their schools. Civilians are forming militia units in their spare time. It's as if their entire species has decided that peace is a luxury they can no longer afford. Council leader. Thexara's voice was barely a whisper. What are you telling us, Doctor? I'm telling you that we may have awakened something that should have been left alone. The humans aren't just preparing for war. They're preparing for the kind of war that doesn't end until one side is completely unable to continue fighting. Ambassador Veltar felt a chill run through her body. Council leader, I request permission to contact the humans directly. Perhaps we can find a peaceful solution before this goes any further. And say what? Demanded Admiral Zorthak. That we're sorry we tried to enslave them? That we're sorry we didn't try to befriend them instead, Veltar replied quietly. Because I'm beginning to think that the only thing more dangerous than being humanity's enemy is missing the chance to be their ally. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships were moving toward their next target. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Fleet Admiral Rick Davis stood on the bridge of the U.S. Dominion and watched the largest fleet in human history prepare for battle. Through the viewports, he could see hundreds of ships stretching into the distance. Each one carried technology that hadn't existed 6 months ago, crewed by people who had learned to fight a war unlike any in human history. Sir, we're receiving final position reports from all battle groups, reported Captain Susan Clark, his second in command. Her voice was steady, but Rick could see the tension in her shoulders. They all felt it. Today would decide whether humanity survived or became a cautionary tale whispered among the stars. How many ships total? Rick asked, though he already knew the answer. 347 combat vessels, sir, plus support ships. That brings us to over 500 total. Rick nodded. It was an impressive number for a species that had only learned about faster-than-light travel by stealing it from their enemies. But the force they were about to face was much larger. Intelligence update on the Omega fleet, Rick asked. Captain Joe Adams, the fleet's intelligence officer, activated the main display. Latest count shows 836 ships from 24 different species. Every major military power in this part of the galaxy has contributed vessels. The display showed the alien formation. It was massive, organized, and represented the combined might of civilizations that had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Against them, humanity was fielding a fleet built in desperation and crewed by people who had been farmers and factory workers just months before. They're confident, Rick observed, studying the enemy formation. Maybe too confident. Sir, incoming message from Earth Command, reported Lieutenant Kate Sullivan from the communications station. President Williams wants to speak with you directly. Rick had expected this call. Put him through. The president's face appeared on a smaller screen. The man looked like he had aged 10 years in the past month, but his voice was strong. Rick, I'm not going to give you a speech about the fate of humanity. You know what's at stake better than anyone. I just want you to know that whatever happens today, Earth is proud of what you and your people have accomplished. Thank you, Mr. President. We won't let you down. I know you won't. Give them hell, Admiral. The connection ended, leaving Rick alone with his thoughts for a moment. Through the viewports, he could see the blue glow of Earth in the distance. Everything humanity had ever built, ever dreamed, ever hoped for, was depending on what happened in the next few hours. Sir, the Omega fleet is moving into attack position, Captain Clark reported. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Rick straightened his uniform and walked to the center of the bridge. Around him, his officers worked with the calm efficiency that had become humanity's trademark. They were afraid, all of them, but they were also determined. "Open a channel to all ships," Rick ordered. "Channel open, sir." Rick looked out at the human fleet and felt a surge of pride. These people had volunteered to fight impossible odds because the alternative was the end of everything they held dear. "This is Admiral Davis to all ships. In 20 minutes, we're going to face the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They outnumber us 2-1. Their ships are bigger. Their weapons are more powerful. Their crews have been fighting for centuries." He paused, watching the enemy fleet growing larger on the display. But they made one mistake. They assumed that being human meant being weak. Today, we're going to show them what it really means. We're going to show them that humans don't surrender, don't give up, and don't lose when everything we love is on the line. Across the fleet, crews prepared for battle with grim determination. In the engine rooms, teams pushed human Velaran hybrid, technology beyond its designed limits. In the weapons bays, gunners loaded missiles that combined human creativity with alien science. On the bridges, captains studied tactical displays and made final preparations for the fight of their lives. 15 minutes to contact, Captain Clark announced. Rick watched as the human fleet began to move. Instead of the traditional formation that the aliens expected, the human ships scattered into small groups that moved independently. To the enemy, it would look like chaos. To Rick, it looked like humanity at its finest. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Omega Fleet," Lieutenant Sullivan reported. "Let's hear it." The main screen showed a creature that Rick didn't recognize. It had too many arms and eyes that glowed with an inner light. When it spoke, its voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Human Fleet, I am Supreme Commander Velthok of the Omega Fleet. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Rick smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Tell the Supreme Commander that humans have a saying. Come and take them." The alien's expression shifted to confusion. "Explain this saying. It means that if you want to destroy us, you're going to have to work for it. And we promise to make it the hardest thing you've ever done." The transmission ended. Rick could see the alien fleet beginning to accelerate toward the human positions. 800 ships moving in perfect formation, their weapons charging for the devastating first strike that would end the battle before it began. "All ships execute Plan Chaos," Rick ordered. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The scattered human ships suddenly converged on the alien formation from dozens of different angles. But instead of attacking the enemy's strongest points, they targeted specific ships with overwhelming force. Captain Steve Miller's battle group hit the alien command ship with everything they had. Captain Mary Johnson's fast attack squadron disabled the enemy's long-range sensors. Captain Danny Wright's heavy assault group punched through the alien formation and began attacking from behind. "They're trying to reform," Captain Clark observed, watching the alien fleet struggle to respond to the human tactics. "Too late," Rick replied. "Lisa, begin Phase 2. Captain Lisa Grant's voice came over the communication system. "Understood. Sir, all stealth ships, you are cleared to engage." The aliens had been so focused on the visible human ships that they had missed the ones they couldn't see. Modified cargo vessels equipped with Valoran cloaking technology suddenly appeared throughout the enemy formation, launching missiles at point-blank range. Supreme Commander Velthok's voice cut through the battle communications, his earlier confidence replaced by panic. "How are they doing this? Our sensors show chaos, but their attacks are coordinated perfectly." "Because chaos is our natural state," Rick replied over the open channel. "We've been fighting in chaos for our entire history. You brought order to a knife fight." The battle raged for 3 hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed, brave crews gave their lives, and the space around the two fleets became a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. But slowly, inevitably, the human tactics began to tell. The alien formation, designed for overwhelming firepower and direct confrontation, couldn't adapt to the human style of fighting. Every time they tried to concentrate their forces, human ships would attack from unexpected angles. Every time they tried to retreat and regroup, human forces would be waiting for them. "Sir, the alien flagship is requesting surrender terms," Lieutenant Sullivan reported, her voice filled with amazement. Rick looked at the tactical display. Of the 836 ships in the Omega fleet, fewer than 200 were still combat capable. The human fleet had lost over 100 ships, but they were still fighting. "Tell Supreme Commander Velthok that we accept his surrender. All alien crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. Medical aid will be provided to the wounded." As the guns fell silent and rescue operations began, Rick felt the weight of what had just happened settle on his shoulders. Humanity had just defeated the combined military might of the known galaxy. They were no longer the new species struggling to survive. They were the dominant military power in their part of space. "Sir," Captain Clark said quietly, "what do we do now?" Rick looked out at the debris field that had once been the most powerful fleet in galactic history, then at the surviving human ships that had somehow achieved the impossible. "Now we figure out how to win the peace," he replied, "because the hard part is just beginning." Captain Linda Evans walked through the corridors of what had once been the Galactic Council headquarters and tried not to think about how strange her life had become. 6 months ago, she had been a patrol officer in the outer colonies. Now she was the interim governor of the most important political center in known space. The building itself was magnificent, soaring towers that reached toward the stars, gardens that bloomed with flowers from 100 different worlds, and meeting halls designed to accommodate the diverse forms of dozens of species. But it was also eerily quiet. Most of the alien staff had fled when the human fleet arrived, leaving behind empty offices and abandoned workstations. "Ma'am, the morning briefing is ready," said Lieutenant Tim Moore, her aide and one of the few people she trusted completely. Tim had volunteered for this assignment, though Linda suspected he was beginning to regret that decision. "How many items today?" Linda asked, checking her tablet as they walked. 47 separate issues requiring immediate attention. Everything from food distribution on Valoran refugee worlds to negotiations with the Ashanti Federation about trade agreements. Linda sighed. Winning the war had been the easy part. Figuring out what to do with victory was proving much more difficult. They entered the main conference room, where representatives from a dozen human departments were waiting. Military officers, diplomats, engineers, and administrators all working together to manage an empire that nobody had wanted, but everybody needed to make work. "Status report on the refugee camps?" Linda asked, taking her seat at the head of the table. Colonel Paul Jackson stood up. His people had been responsible for managing the millions of displaced aliens whose worlds had been destroyed in the fighting. Current population is just over 12 million across 43 different camps. Medical needs are being met, food supplies are adequate, and we've started educational programs for the children. "Any problems?" "Some of the adult Valorans are having trouble accepting that they're not prisoners," Paul admitted. "They keep asking when the executions will begin or when they'll be sold into slavery. It's taking time to convince them that we actually intend to help them rebuild their lives," Linda nodded. The psychological damage from centuries of Valoran military rule was going to take years to heal, but humans were patient when they needed to be. "What about the other species?" she asked. Dr. Lisa White, the Cultural Affairs Coordinator, activated a holographic display showing various alien populations. "Mixed reactions. The Ashanti Federation is cooperating fully. They seem genuinely grateful that we stopped the Valoran expansion. The Zephyrian Collective is cautious but willing to negotiate. The Korath Republic is still deciding whether to treat us as liberators or conquerors." "Can't say I blame them," Linda replied. "We did destroy their entire military alliance in one afternoon." Major Jane Foster, the security chief, leaned forward. "Speaking of military matters, we've had some interesting developments. Several alien species have approached us about forming mutual defense pacts. They want human protection against any remaining Valoran holdouts." "And what have we told them?" "That we'll consider it," But any agreement has to include provisions for democratic governance and individual rights. No more military dictatorships or slave empires under our watch. Linda felt a moment of pride. Humanity could have easily become the new galactic overlords, ruling through fear and superior firepower. Instead, they were trying to build something better. Economic report? She asked. Dr. Sam Roberts activated another display. Trade is beginning to flow again. The Ashanti want to exchange their agricultural technology for our manufacturing capabilities. The Korath have mining rights to rare metals that our shipyards desperately need. And surprisingly, several former Valoran worlds want to join our economic zone voluntarily. Why surprisingly? Because they're not asking to be conquered or absorbed. They want to maintain their independence while gaining access to human technology and protection. It's a new model of relationship that we're still figuring out. Admiral Mike Turner joined the meeting by hologram from his flagship in orbit. His job was coordinating the human fleet that now patrolled half the known galaxy. Linda, we've got another situation developing in the Outer Rim. A group of Valoran warlords are trying to rebuild their empire using captured alien technology. How serious is the threat? Not very, militarily speaking, but they're targeting civilian populations, trying to rebuild their slave labor force. The local governments are asking for our help. Linda considered this. Every time humans intervened in local conflicts, they risked being seen as the new galactic police force. But every time they refused to help, innocent people died. Send a task force, she decided, but make it clear that we're not there to conquer territory. We're there to stop the slave raids and then leave. Understood. Captain Danny Wright's group is closest. They can be there in 4 days. After the meeting ended, Linda found herself alone in her office, staring out at the alien city that sprawled beneath the council building. Millions of beings from dozens of species going about their daily lives, most of them never imagining that their fate was being decided by a species that had learned about space travel by stealing it from their enemies. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Linda was surprised to see it was from Elder Kethvar of the Ashanti Federation, one of the few alien leaders who had supported humanity from the beginning. Captain Evans, the elderly alien said when the connection opened, I wanted to personally thank you for what your people did today. Which thing specifically? Linda asked. We're kind of busy these days. The food shipments to the Korath colonies. My intelligence sources tell me that those worlds were facing famine after the war. Your people sent relief supplies without being asked and without demanding anything in return. Linda shrugged. People were hungry. We had food. It seemed obvious. That's exactly what I mean, Kethvar replied. Do you know what the Galactic Council would have done in this situation? They would have offered to sell food at inflated prices or demanded territorial concessions in exchange for aid. They would have seen suffering as an opportunity for profit. We're not the Galactic Council, Linda said simply. No, you're not. And that's what makes you so remarkable. In 6 months, you've accomplished something that the Council couldn't do in 6 centuries. You've made the galaxy safer for everyone. After the call ended, Linda returned to her paperwork. Reports from human colonies, requests for aid from alien worlds, intelligence briefings on potential threats. The work never seemed to end. But as she worked, she thought about Kethvar's words. Humans hadn't set out to conquer the galaxy. They had simply defended themselves when someone tried to enslave them. Everything that came after was just humans doing what they always did, trying to solve problems and help people who needed help. Knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. It was Tim, carrying a folder marked with the highest security classification. Ma'am, you need to see this. It's a message from Earth, from President Williams himself. Linda opened the folder and read the brief message inside. Her eyes widened as she understood the implications. Tim, call an emergency meeting of all department heads. We need to discuss this immediately. What is it, ma'am? Linda looked out, at the alien city again, then back at the message. Earth just received a communication from a previously unknown species called the Hegemony. They're located on the far side of Galactic Core, and they're asking for our help. Apparently, word of what we did here has spread farther than we thought. Help with what? They're being invaded by something called the Swarm, a species that doesn't negotiate, doesn't take prisoners, and doesn't leave survivors. The hegemony is asking if humanity would be willing to help them fight a war of extinction. Tim was quiet for a moment. What are we going to tell them? Linda stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, she could see human ships in orbit, their crews ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them. Below, alien families went about their lives in safety because humans had decided that slavery and oppression were not acceptable. We're going to tell them what we always tell people who need help, Linda said finally. We're going to tell them that humanity doesn't abandon its friends, and we're going to remind the galaxy one more time why picking a fight with humans is the worst mistake anyone can make. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's capacity for violence. Now it was learning to rely on humanity's capacity for compassion. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, new challenges waited to test both.